Alex,
Yes, Sarah?
so your dad died.
Yeah, he did.
Too soon to ask what we're going to inherit?
I think it's just shame mostly.
God. Jesus Christ. Welcome to Mistakes Were Made, a podcast about non-monogamy for messy and morbid people like us. I'm Sarah, I'm queer, I'm non-monogamous, I'm a therapist, and I've been spending a lot of time with you and your grieving family the last month or so. I'm glad we get to talk about both of those things here today a little.
Me too, I think. And
see.
I'm Alex, and I think I should add amateur grief counselor and estate planner and memorial planner.
Mm-hmm. We've really unlocked
end-of-life
some
caregiver to my bio. Mm-hmm.
What can't he do, people?
Remains to be seen. And I'm Jessica here producing the podcast, resident monogamist. Very impressed with all of the grief counseling, estate planning, memorial planning that you all did, and very appreciative of the two very nice bottles of champagne that I got left by your father.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Somebody got something that's good. We got a lot of beer, let's be honest.
Beer, champagne.
And like an ounce of weed, too.
Only an ounce.
Yeah, right.
Also, Jessica should add to her recent resume grief chef, cook, and general caregiver of us.
Yeah, grief counselor.
Grief counselor, the counselor to grief counselors.
Grief counselor, casserole maker.
Yeah.
It's just all a pyramid scheme.
Yeah. So today we're talking about coming out as poly to your community, and believe it or not, it's related to all of the stuff we've been talking about.
Well, sex and death. I mean, I gotta say, as a therapist, they're two favorite topics.
Yeah. And so we want to talk about like when you share your poly identity, the fact that you're non-monogamous, to your community and who you share it with whom you share it. But before we start, I wanted to, mention that we're a little over a month away from our Evergreen Hearts lecture series about polyamory pitfalls, which is on May 9th at 6:30 p.m. We've heard from some listeners that they already have tickets. So if you're listening to this, don't miss the boat. It's not actually on a boat, unfortunately.
Oh, God, I wish it was on a boat.
It should be. But you can get tickets at evergreenhearts.org, and it's going to be amazing, right, Sarah?
It's going to be amazing. I'm really excited about it. And I think it'll be a great conversation that I know will include the audience as well. Mm-hmm. So it's a chance to hear more from us, but also I think a chance to have a really great conversation.
We're going to do that I can't hear you thing. Like that's how we're going to include you.
I can't hear you.
No, you can do a little better than that.
What's up, Seattle? Except we'll like get the city wrong. Like,
right. Tacoma is what I'm going to say.
Hey, Portland.
Because they're all from Tacoma. No, we're not going to do that. I will never do that. If you ever catch me doing that, just kill me. Okay, excellent segue.
Topical.
Topical. So to clarify a little bit about our topic today coming out, when I started like doing a little bit of research around this, I realized that people talk about coming out as polyamorous in a couple of different contexts, and there's one context that shows up about coming out to your partner who you're already in a relationship. And that is not, we're talking about something very different, coming out to like your community while you're already in an established polyamorous relationship with your partner. So I just wanted to disambiguate that a little bit.
Thank
because
you.
The second one, I think there's a lot to say about it. There's a lot to say about the first one too, but that's a different thing. Then people take a lot of issue with just using that term. Like, I came out to my partner as polyamorous, my monogamous partner as polyamorous. Like, that's a little more complicated than just accept me for who I am, right?
Wow, that is complicated.
Yeah,
I'm like really holding back from asking follow-up questions because you just said that's not what this podcast is about. I'm like, now I want to ask a bunch of questions.
Well, you know what I'm talking about? Like, have you heard of, like, run into this with clients or...
I haven't heard people use the language of coming out as polyamorous to a partner And I think, like, without going down the rabbit hole that we just stated we wouldn't go down, it is interesting for defining the terms. And, like, what do we mean when we say coming out, and why is that a specific term, and how is it used differently or the same? And I guess coming out most broadly implies telling people about something that is personal, intimate part of your identity that is not acceptable or is marginalized, and that where you risk some judgment.
Right.
Does that feel right?
Yeah, I think so. That would apply in both cases.
It would imply both cases, yeah.
Yeah. Right. But in the case where you're talking to somebody you're already in a relationship with, you're like, what you're actually talking about is renegotiating the terms of that relationship, assuming that it's presumed to be monogamous by default, and then you know that's not a unilateral thing that you can do. I think this is like what the discourse kind of says. Like,
interesting.
You can't just be like, oh, I found out I'm poly, so accept me for who I am.
I swear, that's why if I were like queen of the universe and I just got to, as a couples therapist, make one wish for the world, it would be that part of getting into any intimate relationship with someone always included a conversation about the relationship structure and about monogamy. What does it mean to you? Non-monogamy, what does it mean to you? Where, how do you imagine yourself in those different definitions? Especially, and this is like a little thing that's come up a lot in sessions recently, people don't have the same definitions of monogamy.
Right.
So this idea that, like, once you're deciding to be exclusive with someone and you're getting on a relationship escalator, and so it's just assumed that we all know what the agreements are, henceforth it's like we're deleting the dating apps and we're all on the same page. It's profoundly untrue. And it's, I think, one of the more common things that I encounter among couples is that they're just like, this person wants to go to coffee with their ex. That's cheating. And I'm like, God, I really wish that you guys had talked about this earlier. Just like, what does it all mean? This person looked at porn. That's cheating. This person, texted a coworker after working hours. That's cheating.
I mean, I bet if we lived in your ideal world, a lot fewer people would be monogamous. If you had to talk about it at the beginning of every relationship,
I completely agree.
Probably it would come up. And then once you start that conversation, like, is looking at porn cheating, is blah, blah, blah cheating, then it would probably be a slippery slope to, having completely different boundaries and perhaps actually not being monogamous at all.
I was quipping with someone the last couple of weeks who they were asking me, like, do you think that you're naturally, inherently polyamorous? And I think this kind of relates to what we're talking about, like, is coming out an appropriate term? Is it the same as queerness? All this stuff.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what? I don't even know that question matters that much to me. I think that I would do well in any relationship culture where being transparent and emotionally authentic with people was the core goal. And it just so happens that we live in a culture where non-monogamy is the place where that's most openly practiced, I would say, or at least as I've experienced relationship cultures.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of chatter online about, like, the coming out terminology not fitting because it compares the experience of people who are poly to, which is like a relationship structure kind of primarily, I think, in practice, not the same as being gay or trans, and that kind of coming out, and thus you're like comparing oppression. So like a cis het person, like straight-ish person like me, the experience I would have as a result of coming out as poly just is not comparable to, like, the life-threatening experience that, like, a trans person is, the risk that they're taking and being open about it.
Yeah, and I think that is really essential in the way we use that term, is recognizing that coming out about something that's difficult or that you have complicated feelings about or other people might have complicated feelings about is a kind of coming out. And most commonly that term is used for people to come out about something that could threaten their lives and livelihoods more directly than being polyamorous.
Yeah. But that said, I do have a lot of complaints.
I know you do.
About my experience of being public about polyamory. So there are complaints. They're not life-threatening.
They're not life-threatening.
Annoying, though.
But people have made me feel very bad.
Yes, exactly.
And I don't like that either.
So yeah, when words are words and they're used the way that they are. And so all of that throat clearing and acknowledgement aside, this is how we got you to listen to the episode, by calling it Coming Out.
Yeah.
So yeah, can I just dive into like how this has showed up for me recently?
Dive in. Like, why are we talking about this in reference to your dad's recent death?
Yeah.
Like, what's going on? What are we doing?
Just that we saw a bunch of like family came into town, a bunch of like people that I hadn't seen or interacted with, in a long time, kind of like showed up. And so it was like the opportunity to disclose our different relationship structure to those people. And there was just a lot of interactions where it was like would have been vaguely relevant, or people that don't know us or aren't like involved in our daily lives to the point that they would already know, had cause to know. So an example being, my cousin and her wife and their kids were over here for dinner. And like, you were talking to somebody.
I was bellowing at someone on the street.
Yes,
Let's be
shouting out the window at someone.
Let's set the scene.
At a stranger?
No,
at friends who were passing by.
Our neighbors, Zizi and them were walking past, and they were hollering up at us. And so we live on a really busy street. And so I opened the window, and I was hanging out the window.
And then talking about logistics, talking about the schedule. And in that, it was revealed like, oh, you're going to be with the kids tomorrow. And then my cousin was just like, oh, what are you going to be doing, Alex? And what I was going to be doing was going on a date with one of my other partners. And I just like didn't say anything, pretended like I didn't hear her. And I don't know if I want to defend that choice that I made, but that's what I did. And I'm giving myself some grace in this last few weeks of things being difficult. And I was just like, I don't know if I can have that conversation right now. The thing that came to mind to say was, I'm going to be out with my girlfriend. And like that, I could have said that. I should have said that, I guess. But I just like didn't.
Mm-hmm. Jessica, yes.
It's so interesting that I can imagine a scenario in which you say something like that. I'm going to be out with my girlfriend, and people would just think you were joking and laugh.
Yeah.
Yes,
that is what I thought.
Oh, Alex.
I thought that's what would happen, I guess, now that you mention it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then I would have to be like, no, I'm not joking.
It's serious.
It's serious.
We're going steady.
Yeah.
It's interesting also how the context of your father's pretty sudden passing, and then this just rush of relatives that showed up. And they, it's not like we were preparing for this and we anticipated that we were going to have all of these things all these people to navigate, all these opportunities to say something or not say something. And we're also really emotionally taxed.
Yeah.
So we're not like thinking ahead about how we might talk about things in front of people. And I think part of what it revealed to me is how much labor we're always doing in that department when we're not as emotionally taxed. Because when I was like, I don't know how to do this. I'm like, I'm making missteps all the time that invite questions about our polyamory that I wouldn't make if I wasn't fucked up. Basically.
Right. Yeah. And in this case, like those are probably the people who I most, they're like a queer couple. I've like watched them navigate, coming out as queer to our family, from afar, but still been like privy to some of that. And
I'm sure it was all smooth sailing.
Yes, definitely. My deceased dad did not do anything awkward or weird related to that.
I'm not thinking of any examples right now.
He definitely didn't out them to anybody. And it definitely was the first time that he did that. Wasn't the first. I don't know how to frame this. He did that more than once to different people.
He did that more than once to more than.
Anyway.
Not maliciously, but.
Yeah, no, not maliciously. No, sorry. No, just good-heartedly.
Yeah.
In his enthusiasm, for lesbians.
For lesbians, yes.
In particular.
His known enthusiasm for lesbians.
Notable
Some of his best friends were lesbian. True. All true. All true. He was a special, unique man.
He really was.
And...
as lovable as he was problematic, which...
yeah.
in some ways is the best we can hope from the patriarchs in our lives in this current culture.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anywho. Where were we? I don't know.
So you decided not to say anything.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I decided. I impulsively recoiled from saying anything and just let the question hang in the room and pretended I hadn't heard it. I was like over unloading the dishwasher or something, so it was like plausible that it's not like we were sitting there face to face. Anyway, yeah.
And you were saying that you decided to give yourself some grace. You were like, you know what? I didn't tackle that, and I didn't try and smooth it over either. And so in that spirit, I think you were going to make some arguments for why someone maybe wouldn't want to.
Yes, I am. Yeah, I think we should frame this because I believe in everything being framed as an adversarial debate.
Which is definitely part of your family's culture.
Oh my God.
No, it's not. What evidence do you have to back that up? Show me the receipts, Sarah.
Someone come help me.
No, because it's fun. I'm gonna, tell you some reasons why I or other people might not want to disclose that they're polyamorous to their community. And then I understand that you will retort.
Yes, happy to.
So one, and maybe we can talk these through as we go without you retorting too hard, and then you can retort later.
I'll keep my retort levels low to medium, and then turn them up to high retort later.
Good. I'll let you know when I'll turn the retort light on. So a few different things. One is like it's not necessarily that relevant to that many people. Like with my cousins, for instance, it's only relevant because of this conversation that we happen to be having randomly about what we were doing the next day, and they don't need to know. Like there's no business. And I looked up some just like guides for coming out as poly, and this was like affirmed in a lot of them that like you don't have to if you don't want to, and there might be reasons. Here's this lady, Lori Ellington, who's a poly coach. In this is the first Google search result, in fact, when you search for coming out as poly. So she got good SEO. Lori's SEO is locked down. It's from 6 years ago. Can I just play this part of this clip?
Yeah, please.
Yeah.
I was in a conversation with a client once, and she was asking me, well, I kind of feel like I need to come out, but I'm not really sure because there's a part of me that wants to, but there's a part of me that just doesn't think I need to. And we talked about it for a while, and then it dawned on me, and I said, well, do you share your financial information with everybody? Do you share your credit card report with everybody? Do you share your sexual exploits with everybody? Do you share your daily activities with everybody? Like, whatever. Like, when we consider that we are the ones that are in charge of our lives and the information that we share with other people, like that's our choice. And we get to seriously like take our time and just feel into what feels right to share and when.
I could see you nodding along with that list of things. Was that because you agree?
Well, I agree. I agree with a lot of it.
I really good with the moment when she was like, do you share your sexual exploits?
I was like, I do.
Yes,
your eyes
they were
light
like,
up.
do you share your credit card debt with everyone in your life? I'm like, I do.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
In fact.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's true. But I imagine what you agree with is the part that's like, that's your choice.
The idea that you don't have to come out, I think, is really powerfully important. That no, you don't owe anyone any personal or intimate information about you in your life, and no one is owed that.
Yeah.
And you do get to decide, and that boundary is very real, and I deeply respect and enforce it for sure.
Thank you. Point number 2. Why wouldn't you want to? Because the judgment that you may face. from people. So this is from an article, weirdly, in Business Insider, which I guess is about everything now, not just business. They're inside people's business.
How to come out as poly in business.
In business. No, it doesn't have anything to do with business whatsoever.
Really? It's not even
just
like at work?
I've come out many times in my life. I still find it hard to come out as polyamorous.
Wow.
By Ariane Resnick. This is from last year. And in one section, she says, I fear judgment. Polyamory to me is about having an abundance of love in my heart. I adore attention and require copious amounts of it. Okay, that's her perspective, not necessarily resonant with me, but maybe it does. Anyway, back to the clip. Having more than one person to get it from enables me not lean too heavily on my primary partner and to not worry about overtaxing that relationship. I believe that attraction to others is normal and natural, and that acting on it with one person doesn't detract from connecting with another, provided all parties are aware and consenting. Yet the judgments I hear from the world aren't aligned with that thinking, and I fear I'll be seen as someone who isn't satisfied in her relationship, has bad boundaries, or has needs that are too much. None of those things is true, but I still fear the judgment of others. And while I've learned to let go of what strangers think of me, I remain daunted by the idea of my parents disapproving. So I guess going back to that middle part, just like the cliche or the reaction that people might have that like you're not satisfied in your relationship, that definitely resonates with me. That's probably the main thing that I don't want to deal with when I share with people that I'm polyamorous or that we're like non-monogamous as a couple, is like they automatically jump to assume that something is bad in our relationship or something is like kind of imminently going wrong right now. And it's like opening a conversation to that, which is both not the case and like not the conversation I want to be having. I want to be talking about like me and my affirmed choices, not like a mournful conversation about like some projected perceived tragedy going on in our relationship.
I definitely think projection is the key word there, because I've found that it is very common for people to assume that there's something wrong in our marriage when we come out as polyamorous to them. And whatever they say next as their assumption is what's going wrong in theirs.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I would put money on it every time.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And then bad boundaries, I don't think that's the case for me either. I don't know if that's really coming up. Or has needs that are too much. Yes, I feel self-conscious about being perceived as having needs that are too much. Like, that is maybe more accurate, but too much is obviously like very judgmental. And I guess that's maybe like that part is a core questioning of like the choice and like, you should just rein it in. Why are you being too much? Just do what everybody else does and, be monogamous and accept what that allows. And that's like
greedy.
Yeah. Well, you're right. Being called greedy in that way doesn't feel good to me. And I don't want to have that that feels like I will feel judged by that.
That's a powerful, I think, tool of control when it comes to reinforcing the status quo. As a bisexual, I also am called greedy a lot.
As a Creole bisexual.
Is that what it sounds like?
Yeah. I guarantee.
I guarantee I am indeed a bisexual. But it's very similar. It's like, well, that's greedy of you. Why? Why do you think you have the right to be attracted to so many people? I'm actually not sure.
It's fucking batshit. And it's like, I appreciate you bringing this up because it's just like hearing somebody else say that, reflect on how it feels to them to hear something like that. It's just, you can see how insane it is to say that to somebody.
Yeah, I mean, as you were describing it, it made me think, and you're a therapist, Sarah, you can tell me if this is right, but I was like, that sounds like attachment things. Like an idea, or just having gotten from somewhere the idea that your needs, you're not allowed to have all of your needs met. You can only have some of them met. I don't know. What do you think?
I think that's very wise, and I am both thrilled that you brought up attachment before me and also a little bit embarrassed that I didn't see it first.
Well, you're grieving.
Yes, exactly. Thank you. I'm going to give myself a little grace here. I think you're absolutely right. It's like scarcity. The idea that there's a scarcity of love, of attention, of intimacy available in the world. And if you're getting more, as like greedy would imply, there's less for other people.
Right.
And I'm just like, interesting. Tell me about your parents.
And that's not what you say in every other conversation?
Tell me about your parents in every other conversation too. But I think that's spot on, Jess. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. Nailed it. Okay, points number 3 and 4 combined. I'm going to combine them for expediency and because they're related. So I read there's an article from The Cut that's from several years ago, but that was people's anecdotes about coming out. And I don't think I'm going to read the whole thing because there's a lot there, and it's about somebody coming out as both queer and poly at the same time. But the thing she said was that she like told the story is like her telling her mom about being poly and queer, and then she is like, however, a year later I had to come out to her again. I mentioned being queer, and she was like, wait, what?
Oh my God.
She said she did not remember the 3-hour conversation we'd had, so I had to re-come out. When I was done explaining, she said she needed to sit and process the news. So, and this is like not, I feel like I've heard this before.
It is such a thing.
It's such a thing, right? Especially like with parents just being like, well, I did not know that. Like, didn't your mom basically did that to you, right?
This has happened to me. This has happened to so many people in my practice, so many people in my friend group, where you just mention it again and again, and each time you're met with like confusion, shock, like it's like the most gaslighty thing you could possibly imagine happening. And I would be interested to hear from someone who would have more insight into what is happening there. I mean, obviously it's denial.
Yeah.
This is something they're uncomfortable with, and so it gets compartmentalized away into some part of their minds or unconscious minds where they're like, yeah, I'm not going to deal with that directly. And then when confronted with it again, they kind of just have the same reaction over and over. But it is devastating and confusing, and it makes you feel insane.
Right. Like we already talked about this.
We talked about
and you're
this.
making me do all that work again.
And I talked to my therapist about your reaction, and then I processed that. I like got drunk with my friends about it, like for a year. And I can't believe that it's happening all over again.
Yeah. It's
bonkers.
Straight up horrible.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I have not, we mentioned on the podcast, like I think in season 1, like when we came out to my parents. And so, 2 years ago, I also came out to my sister at some point, or like told my sister that we were polyamorous. And in both cases, like it has never come up again.
Really?
Yeah.
Not a whisper.
Not a whisper. Never talked about it. I mean, my dad did at one point make reference to he was having some of his own relationship problems, and he goes, and I've been listening to your blog.
That's right.
And it gave me some ideas. Or
well,
something.
and to be fair, your dad did talk to me about it, which is interesting. But this is, again, in his rush of enthusiasm for lesbians and women who love women. He was just like, so do singles bars for lesbians still exist in Seattle? And I was like, well, what? And Merry Christmas to you, sir.
Yeah.
That's the ham.
Right, and you were like at his grandchild's birthday party.
Exactly.
The trampoline zone.
God, he was really a very wonderful person. Oh. And like just in that memory, I'm like, God, I'm really gonna miss him. Fuck.
Yeah. So yeah, but I brought it up that one time with those people and my immediate family, and then just haven't really brought it up again, and neither have they. And I guess maybe that's related to the other side of this point of it not being a terribly like validating experience usually when you do, and like what I'm trying to like what I would imagine. And I had another experience related to like less immediate where I ran into a couple of coworkers when I was on a date, and it was like I was at play, like a stage play, and I'm just like, it's like my second date with this person, and we're sitting there, and then like in walks my two married coworkers, not like immediate coworkers, but you know, we've known each other. They know who I am. We've known each other. They know the context of my life. They know you, yeah. And they just sit down right in front of us.
Of course.
And I'm like, oh shit, okay. And then we just like chatted up, and then eventually, like the guy is like, so how do you two know each other to me and my date? And I think I'm I guess terrible in these situations. I think I said something stupid like, oh, we just met or something, which I guess could have allowed. And Sarah's looking at me like I'm insane. I just like freeze up in those scenarios, I guess.
Because
like,
to me, like that feels so much more chaotic than just being like, I'm polyamorous and I'm on a date.
right.
It's like so much more
Yeah.
chaotic to me to just like not say anything.
Yes, I know. But
I'm
it's just
actually
hard.
commending
Yeah.
the chaos a little bit.
Oh, you like the chaos.
I was like,
yeah. Well,
that's
that's not
hella
why I did
chaotic.
it. I didn't do it to be chaotic. I did it to not say the other thing.
Yeah, of course. I know.
And then, so anyway, after there's more, Act 2. So then I was like, okay, you know, I can't just leave it like that, which I guess I could have.
Like with your date or with the colleagues?
No, with the colleagues.
Okay. How did your date feel about it? Just
I don't know. I should ask her. I feel like we had a conversation. It was like literally our second date, and she had like just started. She was like new to polyamory. Like she just had gotten divorced and decided that she wanted to be poly, and so she didn't have a lot of frame of reference. She was like really deferring to me, I think, at that point, probably. But so yeah.
I just like want to make sure we talk about how amazing it is to say we just met, like we just met in the lobby and decided to watch this play together.
Could have been that. We just happened to be sitting together. That's what it sounded like. I don't know. I'm such an idiot.
So fucking intense.
No, I love it. Okay.
And then I had to sit in front of the play. 2 hours of independent theater about the trauma of the Vietnam War on Southeast Asian families.
So
And there was witches in it too.
Right.
It was pretty
Ooh,
good.
that sounds interesting.
But I was heavily distracted. But I didn't talk to them after the play. I just like bounced.
And you didn't hang out at intermission or anything?
Then what happened?
Okay.
No, nothing happened at intermission. And then I was like, I reflected on it, and I was like, I wish that I had said something. And I like started to spin out a little bit about like, is this going to be like some thing for them to carry that like, you know, they know Sarah, and like, do they like, had they caught me cheating? Are they going to think that? And so I just felt like that's like not a good thing to have out in the world to whatever end it might meet, but mostly I guess empathizing with their experience, that like are they then, and I think the fact that it's a couple too like makes the dynamic a little bit more. It's not like just this guy by himself or with his friends. It's like he's there with his partner, and so like, is it, you know, what is the conversation gonna be between them, and are they gonna be like carrying this weight of like, should we tell Sarah that we saw Alex on a, you know, out with another woman, or like any shit like that? I don't know. I just like, so I just emailed him and was like,
only him.
Yeah. I don't know why it was only him. Yeah. Only him, because I'd mostly talked to him. She was like talking to their friends, I think, who they were there with mostly. And so we were mostly talking to him, and I just was like, I like sent him a link to the podcast, and like, God, I feel like, and all of these seemed like good ideas at the time. It seemed like a good way to not give a unilateral explanation of my entire life in an email, but be like, if you want to, like, opt into knowing more stuff about that. Here's a way that you can.
Stuff, yeah.
Right. I didn't want to like, you know, be like A to B. Here's, you know, projections of everything you might be thinking. It's like, you can follow this link and find out more about this if you want to or not.
Like, hello, coworkers. We are all sexual people.
Yeah, exactly.
Here are some of the ways that I am sexual.
Yeah. Right. And back to point one, it's like not relevant to most people. Or is it? I don't know. Anyway, it was all a very invalidating experience for me because he never responded to the
Really?
email. No.
Oh my God.
He didn't, and I thought about it a lot of times. And then I think I saw him like actually day before yesterday for the first time, like at work. And he was just like, "What's up?" And I was like, "What's up?" And that was that.
Oh my God.
Sometimes I get a little insight into what it might be like to be a man.
We say, "What's up?" a lot.
And
Well, yeah, it was interesting. I was really struck by you mentioning that it felt different somehow because it was both of them, and that it would have been different if it was just him. Mm-hmm. Like for bro code reasons, or
Trying to find out about the bro code,
yeah,
huh?
I need to
You
know.
got the wrong podcast, Jessica. Because I guess I'm aware that like the idea of cheating or polyamory can be like a bomb thrown into a couple's relationship. Right? Like just mentioning it, and we have had this happen where we told people that we were poly, speaking of coming out to people, and they just spun off and like they got into a fight in front of us.
The night was them fighting about perceived cheating on each other. If one of them would ever cheat, who would be the one who cheated? Which one of them would want to sleep with other people? That has happened. I mean, I'm thinking of like 3 to 5 examples right out the gate.
Yeah.
Wow.
Me personally, I love it.
Yeah.
Now, as a couples therapist, I'm like, you know what? This dinner party was getting a little boring anyway. Let's see what happens next.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Throw that grenade. Yeah.
Throw that grenade. Lob it.
Molotov cocktail.
But you're absolutely right that people's reactions are unpredictable, and then you're in a kind of situation where it's your fault or it feels like it.
And so then I was imagining them like going through that between the two of them and blah blah blah. And then I was like, oh, you know what they need? What would be better, assuming that is happening, and maybe it probably wasn't, but is for them to have more information about it and have some context, and perhaps listen to our podcast and then realize that they too wanted to be liberated. Free people who explored the fullness of their sexuality, because as you said, we are all
sexual people. All right.
So those are my points. Why you might not want to come out or share your polyamory with people in your community. Not relevant. They're gonna fucking forget. They're gonna judge you. They're not gonna forget. They're gonna pretend like they forgot. They're gonna judge you, and it will be an overall invalidating experience.
Where you might have to hold their feelings, which can be very unpredictable.
Yeah.
Jessica, would you throw anything else in the why you might not want to come out to people as polyamorous category? We haven't covered yet.
Gosh, I think you've done a really good job here of enumerating some of these reasons, but the thing that I keep thinking about is a way that I heard someone recently describing or talking about just sort of the concept of coming out overall. So maybe this can be a good segue between the two arguments here. But they talked about how like built into the phrase coming out is the idea that like you're inside a closet, right?
Yes.
And you're coming out of it. But like you are here living a whole ass life in a big wide world. So you're not really like coming out of something.
Right.
You're like asking people into your life.
Oh, yes.
Or into this world, this version of the world that you live in. And I really like I think that the phrase coming out is not going anywhere. Like we know what it means and it is very, very useful for that. But I really liked that sort of like shift in perspective. Like it almost feels like that framing feels like you owe the world an explanation for who you are and how you live, rather than, whether I'm willing to share with you this cool thing about who I am, you know, and do you get to know that or not?
It's a privilege, maybe,
It's a privilege.
to get to know that.
Yeah.
And it's like it's like reaching out with, some like intimacy or like sharing with them, which is why it is even harder when you don't get that in return,
Right.
or like when you feel like rejected or judged when you do that, because that
Right.
sucks. You're like,
Right.
I'm sharing this part of myself with you because I care about you and respect you and because I want to, because that's how people like make connections.
Exactly.
I mean, it's like
You're
when
offering vulnerability.
yeah, it's like with that papaya thing.
Papaya thing.
Where we had a friend who was like, "Do you guys like papaya?" And we're like, "Yeah, it's pretty good." And then she was like, "Ew, I think it's disgusting."
That's right.
I was like, "What the?"
That is a really, really weird way to start a conversation.
Yeah. Okay, maybe it's not exactly like that, but the feeling of being like, "Ew,"
Right.
having somebody say that to you.
You know, and then the test of your true friendship is like, can you just, even though like you love papaya, this person hates papaya, but can you like deepen your friendship by truly digging into what papaya means in the world?
Yes.
Okay.
And
That's
by
a
papaya,
great
I mean,
point. They don't have to agree. They don't have to become papaya lovers. They just have to see the papaya love in you.
Right.
And
Not say ew gross.
not say you gross.
Right.
Yep. Beautiful.
So I got curious while the two of you were on the papaya tangent
About the health benefits of papaya.
Papaya seeds are very good for
the enzymes are excellent for your digestion. No, about the coming out and the closet, why we use that terminology and where it comes from. The two are not actually inherently related.
Oh, interesting.
It sounds like they've become related more recently.
Oh.
Coming out referred to gay people coming out to each other, as in a debutante.
Oh,
So, like, you were coming out to, like, gay society.
We should sell that.
I love it.
We've got a great clip.
Yeah.
Stock audio. Two gendered people, man's voice and woman's voice, sing and sympathetic, joyful,
Right. So that, it's interesting. It actually had nothing to do with coming out to, like, the straight world. It was about being able to find community and your sort of life and self-reflected in others and, like, celebrating yourself in that context. The closet.
I love that. That makes me so much happier
Right.
in the same ways that
Yeah.
the example I brought up did.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, of course. And then the closet is something separate. So what they were saying was the word closet, it was like a euphemism for bedroom. And so specifically like your sexual behavior behind closed doors and or skeletons in the closet to indicate taboo. So
Right.
it's
That's
just
something's hidden away.
that something
Yeah.
is hidden away or it's in this like sort of sexual, private, shameful realm.
Right. Well, and it could even be taking the shame part out. I don't know if that's what it is, but like the idea of it being a thing that is in the bedroom and then transitions into the public is like a less judgmental, but like a really practical way of thinking about like, you know, when it's something to do with your sexuality, like, or your sexual orientation or, you know, your relationship structure. It's like this is either something that is private or it's public. And like you kind of decide to cross that threshold of the bedroom
There are some
of your own volition.
really fascinating kind of implications about the public and private life and where those boundaries are and when they're like enforced to keep you feeling like safe, protected, and well represented, and when they are enforced upon you because you are making people uncomfortable. And I think I don't have like a strong sense of how to delineate between those things, but it's definitely coming up for me.
Yeah. Well, and when it's the latter, it's often framed as the former.
It is.
Or vice versa. Like,
It's sort of like, why would you talk about this?
people will be unkind to you.
Right. It'll be too hard.
Not me, but other people.
It'll make people uncomfortable.
Not me, but other people.
Other people.
Yeah.
I'm doing you a favor
Yeah.
by telling you to shut the fuck up about who you are. Oh, I guess I'm mad.
So we spent the top half of the show kind of talking about why you shouldn't,
Or why you might not want to.
why it might be scary, dangerous.
And so, but now, Sarah, you apparently think that it's worth it.
I do.
Tell us why.
Okay. So a little background. My orientation towards this from the very beginning was to err on the side of being open about it. If you will.
Yes, an open relationship.
A little bit, I was I had to make that decision early on because I was becoming a therapist at the same time that we were opening up, and I was coming out as queer. And to serve the population that I wanted to serve, being able to be public about those identities felt important. And so I kind of made this choice where I was like, you know what? I'm going to be open about this as part of my own sort of the practice of my own values and the kind of therapist I want to be in the world, and ultimately like the kind of person. I had no idea how complicated and difficult that would actually prove to be, which I would say is the arc of most of my decision making, where I'm like, this seems cool and like edgy, let's do it. And then I'm a quarter of the way through and I'm like, God damn it, this is fucking hard. Why didn't anyone warn me? And then everyone's like, we did. And I'm like, no, you didn't. And they're like, roll tape.
That's why we don't talk about this, Sarah.
Exactly. So, and you and I had early conversations about that where we understood that we were going to have different orientations to it. I'm also a writer. As we got into this podcast, there was a lot of talk about me being more comfortable attaching my full identity to it. So we've always had slightly different feelings about that and approaches. Yeah. And in regards to your family and your dad's death and the funeral and everything that happened around it, I think we both were like, without talking about it, and I guess I'm curious to get your thoughts on this, we both just sort of like went back to those positions where you're like, I'm not going to say anything about it, and I'm like, I'm going to err on being honest about it.
Yeah.
And I didn't even really think about it. It was too hard to figure out how to do anything else. So I guess that's what I'm trying to say. Given like how stressed out we already were and how just like emotionally taxed I felt, you know, I'm thinking about your theater example. Sometimes I just tell people the truth because I literally cannot figure out what else to do in the moment. And I'm like, I'd rather deal with the consequences of this than try.
Well, you heard the examples of the things that I came up to do, which were say something that was complete nonsense or say nothing at all.
Right.
So, yeah, you're right. Yeah, and I probably went back to the same thing as well for the same reason, too, that it just felt too hard to do anything else.
It was just too hard. Yeah. So I guess I say all that because I don't want to misrepresent myself as being really virtuous, when actually I was just doing the thing that felt easier in the moment. But given all of that and offering some of the emotional context, and I guess maybe what I want to ask you, Alex, is how do you feel about the fact that I just defaulted to being honest with people? Oh,
I love it when you do
really
that emotional labor on my behalf. Are you kidding?
Okay.
No, yeah, I never mind when you... It's because it's not like the knowledge, it's the delivery, the work of conveying the knowledge.
I see.
I don't want people to not know. I don't mind people knowing. I want people to know. I just don't want to tell them.
Oh, cool. Well, what a great team.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I do. I want to let you get into your reasons, but there is like more here around, you know, that's not really fair for me to do. And I do think it's related to our experiences, as you were saying, like, you know, I don't have a lot of experience based on my life and of having to be vulnerable or potentially be judged. Like I can just pass as regular, powerful. I can be over here being safe and not judged in most realms because of like status and power. And so why do it?
Why do it if you don't have to?
Yeah.
And I'm like,
I mean, that's not an argument, but it's a,
yeah, no, that makes sense.
An impulse. Yeah.
And I'm like, I have to do it anyway. Just throw another thing on the pile. All right. Well, that's the personal stuff. But, you know, the argument for why I think you should consider defaulting to coming out to people, even though I know that that's the less popular and probably supported position. But let's explore it.
Yeah.
Because I think there are things that are worth exploring there.
Yeah.
For example, we went to dinner at your parents' former house, and some of your dad's best friends came over and brought us food. And they like made us pasta and brought us ice cream and wine, which is perfect comfort, and garlic bread. I'm like, this is the most comforting food I could possibly imagine. And these are people that you've known your entire life. I've known for 22 years. And the amount of conversation we've had directly with them is pretty small because they were your dad's friends. And so we knew each other and cared about each other, but we didn't know a lot about each other. And
my dad was always talking.
And your dad was literally always talking. So it did sort of look like feel like we were looking at each other for the first time and being like, huh. Look at a whole person over there.
Yeah.
What's going on? Hello.
We could talk.
We could talk. And in that case, they were telling me their own like journey of queerness and how they came to like live the life and that they wanted to and have the relationships that they wanted to, and it intersected with therapy, and so there was like a lot of points of resonance there. But I realized that they may or may not know that I'm queer for the first time. I was like, oh, interesting. And so at one point, I mentioned my practice. And I'm like, oh, yeah, this is like a common story that I hear from folks in my practice, especially people coming from religious backgrounds. And they were like, oh, what kind of practice do you have? I'm like, well, I work with a lot of queer polyamorous people because I am queer and polyamorous.
And then standing ovation.
And then there was a standing ovation, and they threw
Fanfare.
glitter all over me, and champagne bottles popped, and it was great. No, everybody didn't say anything. Nobody said anything. I would say in a warm way. They didn't say anything in a warm way. And later, as we were leaving, they were like, sounds like maybe we should have some more conversations someday. And I was like, yeah, totally. Cool. Let's.
It's a slippery slope, though, because you're like, are you trying to get free therapy from me?
Maybe.
That's so interesting. What is my point? Yeah, I guess I'm just surprised.
It's complicated by the other company that was there, which was a lot of children.
Oh.
There were a lot of kids there,
Okay.
and I think people really don't feel comfortable talking about this stuff in front of kids. I do, just for the record. But other people really
I
don't.
see what our son wasn't like, smoochy to let them know that he's in
It's
on
like,
it.
here's where my parents talk about polyamory. If you weren't already uncomfortable, I'm going to start making kissing noises. Yikes. And then also your sister was there. And so I think they weren't entirely sure
Right.
how to navigate all of that. It was
Not like in the conversation, but kind of in the room or around somewhere,
was
right?
in the
was she in the
conversation.
conversation? Oh, okay. Oh,
Yep.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
okay.
Yep,
Well,
got it.
she already knew, apparently.
Yeah.
Because
well,
I
your
told
sister
her,
is a person that we've
but-
definitely told multiple times.
Yes.
That was
Yeah.
not the first time
No.
she would have heard that.
Yeah.
Anyway, I say all of that because, first of all, I just tell people in that situation because I don't think I can explain my life very successfully to anyone who cares to know if I don't include that information. I'm like, my podcast is about it. My practice is about it. All of my relationships are about it. The happy hour that I help run, it's about it. You know, like I can't, if you want to know me at all, I have to tell you that I'm queer and polyamorous. Otherwise, I am editing so much out of my life that we don't have a relationship.
Right.
You know, like I don't know how to talk about what I do or the things that I care about and somehow not mention that. So I would say in the should category, if these are people you care to have a relationship with in any meaningful way, there is an argument in that direction.
I know I'm not supposed to be retorting right now, but this is making me think about how there are a lot of people who I feel that I have a relationship with and relationships that are important to me where I have had the experience of like talking about this a lot and not feeling like it was validated. And so you saying that makes me feel like, oh, those relationships are not very good or like real. And that sucks.
It does suck, and I agree.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the should and shouldn't. It's like in the should and shouldn't category because the way people respond and how they do or don't follow up with you says a lot about the quality of your relationship with those people, and that may or may not be something you want to know.
Yeah. It's a bummer.
It is a bummer. And I don't think any friendships that... I don't know that I hold any meaningful friendships with people in my life now who I have told that to directly and have never brought it up again with me or acted really uncomfortable
Yeah, and I think I'm talking about a little bit further level of like just not like that extreme, but just like it being a hard thing for them to talk about, or like it being not really feeling seen in the conversations. Kind of back referencing some of that stuff we were talking about earlier.
Right.
But yeah, that's a hard thing to think about.
It is.
Important relationships in your life. And I want to ask, are any of these relationships that you're referring to with men? Because it's very hard to get men to talk about stuff like this.
I would say, I mean, my male friendships, yeah, I'm very explicit about it with them. And in most cases, with a few exceptions, we do talk openly about it.
Yeah.
And I'm not friends with men who can't do that. So I don't have that many male friends. No, I do actually, by comparison to other people. But, you know, your point is taken, is what I'm trying to say.
I mean, it's like I have a few male friends who will talk to me about it, but, and will like bring it up. I feel like the only one who brings it up is like one of my only male friends who's like single, who's not married.
Yeah.
The ones who are married and monogamous are kind of like, it feels like they don't want to. It feels like sensitive or
it's
whatever.
It's too dangerous.
And like there's been times where we've sort of gotten into it like when in very deep levels, like we've been hanging out for like days at a time, but it's not going to come up in like a superficial conversation, even with people like when we were having trouble in our relationship, like the people that I went to. Yeah, it's just like not, and I guess I'm like, and don't worry, they're not listening to this podcast.
No. And if they are listening to it, they'll never tell us that they listen to it.
Yeah, right.
I think it's entirely possible that some of these people do listen to this podcast and then never tell us that they do. So to those people, hi, we see you.
Yeah, and like, talk to me.
Talk to us. No shit.
Yeah. Anyway.
Okay, so I wanted to say, I don't know if this feels relevant, but I wanted to mention it. There are certain things that in our divided society, we have decided we do not talk about with like loved ones or in close relationship, lest we risk that very relationship. And religion and politics show up there often. And there is, I think, like a generally agreed upon emerging social contract that like you can sometimes stay in relationship with people and just avoid those topics because it makes everyone too uncomfortable, right?
Yeah.
For the record, I don't avoid those
No, I was going to say I will talk about politics with everybody. Yeah.
So as a general rule, I'm just not a type of person that's like will avoid discussion topics for the sake of people's comfort if they're like values of mine. But I do think that these things are different. With religion and politics, there is something like inherent in the idea that you're trying to sway people to another way of living or another belief system or something. With polyamory and with queerness, I don't care at all what you do or how you feel about it in your own life, right? I'm just simply saying like, this is who I am and I don't want to hide it from you. So I just wanted to make that distinction because it felt relevant to our life and times.
Yeah. Although with politics, I do want to sway people to like, Palestinians deserve human rights and to not be killed in a mass genocide.
Right.
That's not like, I'm not like trying to respect your position about that.
No, I don't give a shit. Like, free Palestine, ACAB. I will blow up any Thanksgiving dinner. I will happily blow up any Thanksgiving dinner with those two positions. So yeah, invite me to your next Thanksgiving dinner, which is a problematic holiday.
You're like, I'm boycotting it.
Yes,
but you can invite me, bitch. Not available.
I'm so fun.
I'm going to a protest that day.
I swear I'm fun. So other things around the like why you should. You were saying like it's not relevant to most people. And I think this is, again, we're getting into this really philosophical conversation about the personal and the political, the public and the private, who gets to decide what is where and why. And when that's like something that the person most impacted gets to decide, when the person with like the least privilege in the situation gets to decide, or when it's being imposed. And so I would say talking about your relationships in open and honest, transparent, respectful ways is relevant to everyone, no matter what kind of relationship you have. That's just the right practice to have in this world, I think.
Well, yeah, say more about why it's relevant, how it's relevant.
Because I think the practice of like hiding who you are and how you love and who you share your life with is just not a healthy practice.
Regardless of whether the person you're sharing it with, like regardless of their kind of status or relationship to you.
That's a great question. So I did have like this kind of sub point here where I am far more inclined to lob these little grenades or be really honest about this or make people uncomfortable when I perceive us having either like lateral privilege or they have more privilege than me.
Right.
But, you know, when they talk in comedy about how you should, like, punch up, right? I'm, like, throwing grenades up. Yeah. I think is what I'm trying to say. And that is part of my value system, too. I don't want to go into cultural contexts that I don't understand and start mucking around and making people feel really uncomfortable because I think my truth is the most important thing in the room. So I think that is, especially as a white woman, I think that is super important to hold and restate because we have a bad reputation when it comes to that.
Yeah, and, like, that's why I don't, you know, talk about being non-monogamous with students. Like, I'm in a position of relative power, and so, like, that I don't feel as conflicted about that decision. Like, and it doesn't sound like you're saying, like, it is relevant to those people, right?
Yeah, that's tough because I think there's also the opportunity to be a role model
Right.
for
Good point.
people.
Yes.
And in that case, I would say being open about who I am and how I live and how I love and the relationships that I have is, I think, good modeling for people, even if they live very differently or choose to do it differently. I don't think it can hurt.
Yeah.
But I also just don't want to center my own value system in especially cultural or racial contexts where I have a lot more privilege because I just think that is like such a white lady thing to do. And I'm just like not trying to do that. And I don't understand all of the context. And so I think it's, I don't know, worth mentioning.
Yeah.
What were you going to say?
That making sure that your value system is what's actually coming across is what's hard. You know, like in that situation with students, it's like, yeah, if I could present the perfect articulation of why I believe in polyamory from like a principled social perspective as well as why it's the best for me, then that would be great. And like hence me like sending this podcast to the person I was having that conversation with. But if the communication is going to get muddied to the point that it's like I'm saying, you know, I'm just a man and I just want to have sex with lots of people, high five. You know, it can come across, I'm conscious of it coming across that way. Or like, I'm, you know, it turns out I'm married, but I'm still on the market, you know.
Solicitous.
Like, yeah, solicitous, right. There's a lot of other ways that it could land. And so you were like, you want to get it perfect. And then sometimes I'm just like, I'm not going to try and get it perfect with these people. I'm just not going to have the conversation at all.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah. And I understand that. I respect that too. I think that is, it makes a lot of sense to fall on that side of it, especially in a student-teacher situation. Oh, I wanted to say one other thing about the positionality and privilege. I don't know how this is going to land. You all tell me. I think that making middle-class, upper-class, rich white people uncomfortable is in and of itself a valuable goal.
Yes.
I'm just like, and I'm not even sure how I would unpack that, but as we were talking about it, I'm realizing like, no, that is just something that I kind of enjoy doing.
Oh, I mean, and I think that like it's talked about a lot in like racial justice work, any kind of social justice work, that just like, yeah, sitting in discomfort is part of that work for white people, for people with privilege. Like, so there's an element of that.
Yeah.
The more money, power, privilege you have, the more possible it is to sit in a groove in a suburb somewhere and never have anything move you off the smooth gliding track towards I don't know what, but
Death, I
Towards,
think.
towards
death.
dying
Just to connect
alone.
it to the other theme
Dying
in
in
this
shame.
podcast. Yeah.
beautiful side-by-side funeral plots.
that are
Cemetery
masking
plots, excuse me.
who knows what kind of
Right.
ongoing relationship turmoil that you never talked about with your partner or with your community because it was too shameful and you never wanted to question or threaten your own privilege as a person who's passing as somebody who is safe and square and powerful.
Huh. Wonder who you're talking about right now.
Wow, that just really came out fully formed.
Interesting.
Well, I'm talking about myself also, and like that's partly why. Yeah. Like, I mean, that is true. That's like why, like, because of my adjacence to that, like the safety of that status that you're talking about. Like, that's the reason that I'm less willing to do it. You know, because like.
I would say also it's not just a contempt for white culture that makes me want to make white, middle class, and rich people uncomfortable. It's not. It's also the more privilege that people have, the more fragile they are around experiences of discomfort. And I think that that is a destructive force in this world. I think it's destructive in their lives, and I think it's destructive in the lives of people who have less power and privilege than them. And so I actually think it is a really valuable endeavor to be like, no, what we're working on here is everybody being able to tolerate a little more fucking discomfort. Because a big part of the reason why this world looks the way it does is because this class of people can't. Am I talking about the boomers specifically? Yes. Is this my segue into the boomer section of this podcast? Yes.
That also flowed very freely. No, I completely agree with you, not just in reference to boomers, but to everybody. And that's like why the grenade throwing is, I do fundamentally believe that that's valuable. Like if you're in a monogamous relationship and you've never talked about, like you were saying before, like if you've never talked about your decision to be monogamous, then you should. I want you to. And you can certainly land back at, yes, monogamy is the best thing for us. That's what we both want. Like, more power to you if you land there. But if you're in an uninterrogated monogamous relationship, I feel that, like, Sarah's doing you a favor when she brings that up, or, you know, says the thing that's going to start that conversation for you. Because
if you're too
gonna be a better
fragile
couple
to
for
even
it.
hear about the existence of non-monogamy, then your life
Then
is a
turn
mess.
off this podcast right now. Because
No, I mean it. That it's like, it's too much struggle.
Yeah.
That's like too fragile of a place to be in. And I mean that like as someone who's been in those fragile places. Like I was not born really good at tolerating discomfort. And I still have a lot to learn in that department. And I just know that like the personal suffering I experienced when I had to desperately avoid questions about my queerness, my sexuality, desire, sex, racism, all of these things that were so uncomfortable, and I did so much work to avoid actually encountering them head on. It was so much worse than just...
Or your partner's desire.
Or my partner's desire. Yeah. It was so much worse. So I think that is my big fat argument for why you should.
Yeah, and so why
You don't have to be a crusader like me to use a problematic term. But that is, I think that's why I default to should disclose.
Yeah. Yeah.
It'll be fun.
Is that party that you're at kind of boring anyway?
Yeah, right.
Treat yourself to a little chaos.
Okay, well, I humbly submit. I surrender. You are correct from the...
That is not as satisfying as I thought it would be.
It is interesting that we realize that, like, for you, Alex, it's not the people knowing, it's the telling people that's so
That is
hard.
interesting.
Like,
Yeah.
that, I don't think I fully realized that. And it kind of makes me think about, I mean, we've talked maybe not on the podcast, but other times about, like, when something difficult is happening, how it's actually useful that people will talk about you, right? Like, someone's getting a divorce and, you know, the people in that marriage don't have to tell every single person they know because their network will sort of spread the word, share this information that people need to know. So there's something interesting there, maybe.
I also, like, talking about the boomers again for a moment.
Yeah.
There is a way that discomfort is weaponized
Yeah.
to really solidify and hang on to systems of power and control, and where you're told that your life, the way you live, your very presence, how you look, the color of your skin, your culture, is making people uncomfortable. And like that actually does a lot of fucking work to maintain the status quo, and a status quo that serves a specific demographic of people, and white wealthy boomers are at the top of that pyramid. And so their kind of discomfort, I don't trust it. I don't trust it. I don't trust their discomfort.
Yeah, it's not a good barometer of like what is moral or what should be, what should be happening or not happening. Yeah, and that's where you're talking about like the harm that is done, not just to yourself by keeping this in or by like these levels of shame and non-disclosure, but the harm that is done to everybody.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but it is not easy. And when we're talking about our family, our parents, people with whom we have like very deeply attached relationships, where we like, it's the blueprint of who we are and how we learned about love, it is incredibly complex. And if you layer like grief and death on top of it, it's almost impossibly complicated from an emotional perspective to know how to navigate it.
Yeah.
And I think that you've done an amazing job, honestly.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Allow me to deflect that compliment.
Sure.
By saying that
You're like, can we go back to arguing our points?
that it is like so much, it's hard and yet so much easier with my family and with this thing than it would be with other people. You know, reading some of those stories of people coming out as poly or queer to their families, like it's, you know, there are a lot worse situations to be in where, you know, those people who are your attachment figures and, you know, important people in your life will out and out reject you.
Yeah.
On the basis
like sever
of
ties with you.
Yeah, on the basis of like, you know, religious beliefs or whatever, cultural taboos. So I do feel, what's the word that's not blessed? Privileged to
Lucky,
lucky to like have a family that is at least outwardly somewhat accepting and wouldn't do that stuff, even if, you know, it's like it's a much more passive rejection.
Yeah.
That it still feels like a little bit like a rejection, but
I also just wanted to throw out here that we know statistically most people, at least half of people in this culture, cheat on each other. There's a lot of infidelity. And among the demographics that we're talking about, among the folks that we were grieving with in the past couple of weeks, there's a lot of infidelity. There's a lot of cheating. Some of it is well known, some of it lesser known, some of it covert, some of it just whispered about. And I just want to throw that out here too when we talk about whether or not coming out as polyamorous is relevant, because I think that it does offer an alternative. You know, knowing that a lot of people are sleeping with other people secretly, and that there are a lot of like emotional consequences to that impact families intergenerationally. Being able to say openly and honestly that there are alternative ways of having relationships to that, I do think makes it relevant to a lot of people. Arguably most people.
yeah. And we're at the end of the podcast now, so probably nobody's still listening. So I can say that literally happened in my family. And like when I was referencing the one follow-up conversation that I ever had about, you know, polyamory with my parents, like it was proven to me that it was useful in that way.
Yes.
Because they were like, maybe I don't have to navigate this alone or whatever. Maybe there's another way. And so, yeah. Pat on the back to us for showing people that we love that there is that other way. And that's a great singular testament to like why it is worthwhile to have those conversations, because it is a gift.
So nobody that we've told this to in real life has like thrown confetti on us or popped bottles of champagne or heartily shaken our hands and slapped us on the back or anything like that. But Jessica, maybe you can put that Foley in.
Yeah. Oh, totally.
When you
I think we have just
produce
like an
this.
applause.
That would be
button.
great. Thank you. Appreciate that. Jessica, anything else that you want to mention that we didn't touch on regarding this as we close out?
I mean, now I am trying to remember what I said when you guys told me. I have no recollection whatsoever, but...
I think she said, we should start a podcast.
Probably.
I mean, I do think that I've trained myself for conversations like that, like anything. Someone trained me to, like, if people say they're getting a divorce, to say congratulations. Obviously, if people come out about their sexuality, I would always be happy for them. So hopefully I was happy for you guys.
I believe you said, I love that for you too.
I love that for you. But are you going to go to sex parties? That's probably what I
And
said.
then we immediately segued into a conversation about that.
Yeah.
Have you guys seen the ice storm?
All right. Well, thank you for doing this podcast with me. I know it's like a sensitive time and talking about all of this in reference to polyamory and publicly is, I don't know, challenging, but I think it's worth it, and I'm glad we got to.
Yeah. Me too. When you cash the checks from our podcast sponsorships, it's really worth it.
It sure is.
I mean,
Have you been cashing checks?
yeah, you didn't know? Yeah.
It's enough to buy one piece of glitter per podcast, and ultimately a handful of
Yeah.
glitter.
Well, we did get that free champagne though, so
That's true.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Let's go
So
pop
we'll use
it.
that, yeah.
It's
Yeah.
1
All
o'clock
right.
on a Monday.
Yeah.
Let's do
Yeah.
it.
Why
All right.
not?
Okay, we're gonna go do that. Thank you for listening to Mistakes Were Made. You can find us on Instagram and on email at mistakescast at Instagram or at gmail.com. Thank you for the emails that have been coming in. And don't forget to see us on May 9th at Evergreen Hearts.
See you all there. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.